Hello, Rebels. Welcome to California Rebel Base. We're so excited to have you back. You know what we're doing here. We're trying to save California. We've got a really exciting guest, Todd Spitzer, who is the Orange County District Attorney. And he's actually putting his time where his mouth is, which is actually doing everything he can to try to save the state of California, just like we do here. So like and subscribe. Make sure you follow us on whatever podcast format you like, whether or not that's Spotify, Apple Podcasts. You can watch us on YouTube, and everybody join in the fight. We got to save California together. So without further ado, let me introduce Orange County District Attorney Todd Spitzer. Todd, thank you so much for coming on the pod. This is exciting.
Oh, it's great to be here. Thanks. I'm excited about our conversation.
Oh, good. Okay, so can we back up a little bit? Because I do want to kind of set the stage.
You want me to back up chronologically or actually push my chair away?
Neither. Look at the lawyer being so precise. See, this is why lawyers get a bad rap. We're too technical with our words. Okay, the district attorney's office. Nobody cared about it. No one cared.
Right.
Until all of a sudden, it's like mayhem. There's chaos on the streets. You know, up here in Northern California, we've got Chesa Boudin. He's an entire piece of work. You guys got Gascon. And so I think it would be nice to set the table for listeners on what does the DA do? Are you guys just doing the bidding of the cops? What's the relationship between the district attorney's office and cops? Because it gets pretty complicated with the defund the police talk.
Sure.
So maybe just lay it out for listeners.
So, look, I run the third largest district attorney's office in California and the sixth largest in the nation. I mean, this is the real deal. I've got 900 employees, 300 attorneys, 150 investigators, and $150 million a year budget. Half a cent of sales tax is used to fund 20% of my operation. So, the fact of the matter is what happens in Orange County can have a dramatic impact on the rest of the country. And now the George Soros and what they call the progressives, they call themselves progressives and woke DAs as if they just, everybody just woke up, right? And the fact of the matter is they're regressive. And they're setting, actually, irrespective of all the reforms that they think are going to absolutely make law enforcement and prosecutors accountable, they're actually making our streets unsafe. And for example, in Los Angeles County, George Gascon is not filing sentence enhancements. We'll get into that. He disbanded the gang unit. Homicides are up 300%. Chesa Boudin is not in San Francisco County. He's not prosecuting petty thefts. The Walgreens are closing. The CVSs are closing because theft is out of control. If anybody noticed, the homeless population is exploding. The homeless are very, very aggressive. They have this whole attitude as if the streets are theirs, right? Just look at Venice Beach, California. What happened historically is that district attorneys we were more at the bottom of the ticket on the ballot, and we were just kind of there in the background. But then people started realizing and making the argument that mass incarceration and the mistreatment of people of color, black and brown in particular, by the police were the result of prosecutors not holding police accountable. So we are now in this entire mix and this dialogue about whether police in the United States of America are being held accountable because we are the ones that are chosen by society to hold the police accountable in terms of prosecutions. So I think that's why everybody said, oh my goodness, we could really change American policing by changing who the prosecutors are in America today.
Yeah, a lot to unpack there. And I want to make sure we get to Soros. Yeah. I want to make sure we get to Soros because that's actually so fascinating to me, the money being poured into these races. So I want to talk about why.
Sure.
But first, let's talk about racism. Because I think a fundamental problem is this perception that the American justice system is racist. So I think we need to start with that do you see racism in the system? If so, where do we see it? And I think people would probably say there is some, but it's not as much as people think. But you're the expert. Tell us, where do we see racism in our justice system?
I think it's the part of the country you're in. I mean, I've traveled extensively through the South. I watch all these police shootings very carefully. I'm the one in Orange County who makes a decision whether or not an officer is going to be charged with a crime for a shooting. We investigate all the shootings. Now, with our new Attorney General, Mr. Bonta, and the legislature. They did change the law, so if somebody was determined after a shooting by police to be unarmed, now the Attorney General is coming in to do those investigations. But all the investigations heretofore are led by the 58 district attorneys in California. So, what I want people to appreciate and understand is that we are front and center in all these debates. And so, your question is very well taken. But I do think that we have engaged in mass incarceration. So I'm not this kind of person, and I never have been, even though I've been a Republican, for my voting life. I'm not one of these elected officials or office holders that looks at the world in these really easily defined boxes. The world is not black and white. It's complex and it's gray. And we have to admit that police have used force inappropriately. They have policed in certain communities differently. I used to be a police officer. I was a police officer for the city of Los Angeles for 10 years. I patrolled an area of color, East LA, for those entire 10 years at the Hollenbeck station. Do I believe that communities of color need the police more than ever? Absolutely. See, what people don't understand, and we need to break this down too, is that people in minority communities where there tends to be poor communities and more crime, they actually want the police. But kind of the 100%. Opinion makers are out there saying it's the police that are beating you down and oppressing you. So I think as a prosecutor, I have absolutely acknowledged that we have utilized our prisons and our jails to deal with our mentally ill because we haven't had a place to send them. And so when the mentally ill commit, say, a minor crime, we incarcerate them. That's got to stop. And in Orange County, we're doing phenomenal things, if we have time, about how we're dealing with our mentally ill. So I do believe that we have engaged in mass incarceration because we haven't handled things well, especially for people who are using drugs and abusing drugs and are addicted to drugs. So that is a very important dialogue we need to have. But do I think that prosecutors need to hold the police accountable and to enforce the laws against the police as any other citizen? The answer is yes. But there's a reaction that's happening in America today. Police academies are down. People don't want to become police officers. The retirement of police chiefs is higher than I've ever seen. People are leaving the profession of policing because we used to wear the white hat, prosecutors and police. And now some people have put a black hat on us, especially with the media. And we have been labeled inappropriately as if we're all bad actors. And nothing could be further from the truth. But do I have a responsibility and a duty to meet out the bad actors? Absolutely, I do.
Yeah, absolutely. And, so I grew up in a community of color, and I'm not going to say we liked cops, but the community is very pro enforcement of the laws. I mean, our communities are riddled with crime, and you actually want that to stop. So there's not an sort of overall police or law and order sentiment. Having left that community, which means there's some social mobility, I'm stunned how many white liberals think they know what the people of color want and what those communities sort of deserve. And they use this racism card to really actually end up making those communities less safe. And I don't think anyone can look at what's going on in LA County or in San Francisco or in Contra Costa and say that those communities are more safe. Crime is up in LA. Well, some of you are going to know the stats. I don't know them. But, what do you think is the problem about
homicides are up 300%. Homicides are up 300%.
300%.
Right.
See, I mean, that's insane. So where is the messaging going wrong that people are electing? Because they are electing these very progressive DAs. Why?
Well, I mean, look, in campaigns, money isn't the absolute equalizer, but money can make a huge difference in campaigns. I mean, just to give you an example, in Orange County, right, we're adjacent to LA County, which is a major media market. I spent $1.5 million in my race 3 years ago to become district attorney of Orange County. And if the George Soros is the world, look, George Soros and the progressives, George Soros himself put $5 million into George Gascon's campaign or independent expenditures to help elect George Gascon. So George Gascon was already a known entity. I mean, he was a San Francisco DA. He had been a police chief in another city. He worked LAPD most of his police career and did ascend very high in the ranks. But then when Gavin Newsom appointed him district attorney in San Francisco, I mean, the guy drank the Kool-Aid, and he became a person that is not even recognizable to law enforcement. And so I don't know if you can see the books behind me, but that's George Gascon's reading list. And I've ordered all those books and read them. And some of the things that are being pronounced by academics and liberals in our universities that George Gascon has subscribed to is fundamentally changing policing in America and prosecution in America today.
But did he always think that? And I could be totally wrong here, because I thought Gascon was actually part of the three strikes reforming way back when.
He was the one. Actually, George Gascon and Steve Cooley, who was the DA of LA, they're the ones that supported the proposition to require a third strike to have to be a serious or violent felony. It used to be if you had two prior serious violent felonies, the third could be any felony. So George Gascon and actually Steve Cooley paired up and passed that to make the third strike have to be a serious and violent felony. But the irony of that, and I'm glad you asked that because I literally put that in the back of my own brain, was that he would enforce three strikes. In other words, his whole argument was we need to make three strikes fair. But now, as the DA of LA, he's not even charging strikes. So
yeah,
that's
because he was up here, and I remember his name being somebody who assured people, "Don't worry,
right?
People who are violent criminals will still be in jail. They will be off the streets. Don't you worry, voters." So then, when his name was popping up again as being somebody who's not at all, he's eliminating enhancements. He's basically, anti-victim, pro-criminal. It's remarkable because that's actually a switch, and so people need to figure out why did he switch so much, and it's probably the money.
I think he's been a chameleon. In other words, he's done whatever he needed to do to get to the next step in his career. So he said whatever he needed to do to become district attorney of San Francisco. Now he said or did whatever he needed to do. Think about this, right? He defeated Jackie Lacey, African-American female Democrat, in a county with a very large African-American population. So George is very smart, okay? Don't discount his smartness. He's very smart, but he's very wrong on policy.
Okay, but then let's talk about Soros, because she actually was a pretty popular DA. I actually see you guys as quite similar, meaning I think that there's how many DAs are there?
58.
50 something?
58.
Yeah. So there's 55 of the DAs in the state of California generally agree that the system requires some reform. Okay.
It does.
If there's racism,
absolutely, it does.
If there's racism, let's root it out. Let's fix it. I think where people violently disagree is on the how. And so she was, I think, very, upfront about the failures in the system and how things needed to change. And then this flood of money came out of nowhere. And here's my take. And then I want you to respond to my take, because I'm just an average voter and I could be wrong, which is nobody was paying attention until you get millions flowing into the system. And all of a sudden you've got the radio waves, TV, digital ads, all saying that, this candidate supports racism. They're anti-people of color. They love mass incarcerating people of color. And this other person is not a racist. And so really the vote becomes like, who do I think is a racist or not? And that's how people are winning in these races with this massive influx of capital. But you're in the middle of it. So is that the right take?
Yeah, no, I think you're spot on. It's pretty amazing to me how Jackie Lacey could lose. But look, there was COVID. Her timing was just awful because COVID hit. We had all kinds of protests. LA, Beverly Hills, Santa Monica was the heart of that. And the Black Lives Matter movement really, after George Floyd, you think about, go back and recount this short history. George Floyd happened, civil unrest, COVID, and the black community turned against one of their own. And she didn't, in my opinion, and I think she's a lovely, lovely person, lovely lady, but she's not a great campaigner. She wasn't a politician, right? She was recruited from within the office as a career prosecutor, and I just don't think she understood or appreciated what you need to do when the forces of evil are coming after you. You need to get out there and fight back in the streets too. Like if they punch you, you got to punch them right back. And so
and that's kind of depressing, though.
Why?
Right?
Why is that depressing?
Well, because I think voters don't want the DAs to be politicians, right? I mean, back in the day, I interned at the DA's office when I was a baby, and at the time, these were ideologues, and you wanted them to be ideologues, right? The DAs were believers. Like their point is law and order, justice, make sure communities are safe. The public defenders, similarly, they were ideologues, right? They sort of believed the DAs, overcharged. They just cared about conviction records. And so they really believed in making sure they were defending the wrongly accused, or making sure at least they kept the DA fair. If everything's now becoming politics, like how do us as voters make sure that, there's good lawyers who believe in what they're doing are the proper people being elected rather than politicians?
Well, let me distinguish that. First of all, you have to win office to make decisions. You got to get there, okay? And so that means you have to campaign. And today, the world is torn apart in terms of messaging. We are all on our phones. We're all on social media. We're all listening to podcasts. And the world is full of information pouring into our little brains all the time. And the question is, how do you decipher all that? How do you sort it all out? And if you don't understand that if you're not the messenger, you will be messaged about in a way that you don't like or you appreciate. So there's a difference between being somebody who is going to be out there fighting to advocate for your message, and then somebody who is a politician and making political decisions as a prosecutor. That is a extremely hardcore bright line for me. We do not allow politics to permeate our decision-making in the district attorney's office one iota. But am I out there when George Gascon is not prosecuting fully murderers who are sex offenders against 8-year-old victim from my county who was murdered, and when he gets elected, he drops the death penalty and wanted to make this murderer eligible for parole? I was up in LA at the Pomona courthouse shouting to the highest rooftop, Judge, give me my case back. I'm not going to let George Gascon prosecute this case. So you have to be vigorous. You have to be aggressive. On the oil spills, a week ago, last Monday, I was out there when the platform and pipeline operator said, I'm going to go down and send our divers. We're going to cut out that pipeline and we're going to repair it. And I said, over my dead body, are you going to touch that pipeline? We are going to send down divers who are independent to determine the cause of what happened with that pipe. You're not to touch that pipe. You need a prosecutor who's your chief law enforcement officer to be out there fighting for justice. And otherwise, in our day and age, everybody will define it for you. You think I can allow the LA Times to define my performance as an Orange County District Attorney? I can't let that happen. So I have to be an advocate for prosecutors, fair, just, and transparent prosecutors.
Yeah, I think that's such a great point, the fighting for justice, because I think maybe where there's such a misalignment is, what does that mean, right? Does justice mean enforcement of law and order, or does justice mean making sure people of color are no longer discriminated against? And that's where I think people are really having a tough time distinguishing, because they believe the system to be racist. And I think that breeds the Gascons and Chesa Boudins of the world. If they believe that, then justice equals being light on crime.
Do you remember Kung Fu? That maybe you're too young, but David.
That's just a lot of Botox.
No, but David Carradine, right? David Carradine, they had that Kung Fu show. And the whole idea with Kung Fu is you take the energy of your opponents and you use it, you sweep them and you use it against them. And that's why I have all of George Gascon's books that he advocates for here, and why I've read them all. Because you have to understand how your opponent thinks and why they think the way they think. And when you can concede certain points that they make, you should concede them right away. I mean, why fight about areas of agreement? In fact, they started this group called the Prosecutors Alliance, which is Chesa and George and Dinah Beckton from Contra Costa County. And I joined that group. Now, they haven't invited me to one meeting, but I joined the group because I wanted to sit down and be part of the dialogue to show them where I agree, but also where I disagree, and see if we could have common ground. Because I don't think it's good for society when your prosecutors are feuding with each other. I think that actually hurts confidence in the criminal justice system. And we're the ones that put on our cases in court. We're the ones that ask for certain sentences, how we ask for bail. Like, people have to unequivocally trust us, because if they don't and they lose faith in us, we are the front line. We are the gatekeeper to make sure that the system works. Remember, the police can arrest somebody and they have to be arraigned within 48 hours, right? We're the ones that make the charging decisions about what somebody could suffer many hours and days and weeks and months after that first 48 hours. So while the police, everybody goes, oh my God, the police have so much power. Actually, they can really influence your life, don't get me wrong, but they can only do it for the first 48 hours.
Yeah, can we move to the death penalty for a second? Because I'm a little confused as a voter, as like, what the hell happened? Because didn't we put this to actually the voters? And the voters yet again
Multiple
said
times.
in the state of California, I was going to say, it might be even several times, we believe in the death penalty. We want the death penalty. So, of course, Gavin decided he gets to play God as usual and disagree. But how does that all work? I mean, at a minimum, I think once you know that the voters wanted the death penalty, then it is the obligation of the district attorney to make sure that you're charging as aggressively as possible. You're doing enhancements so that these people go away for at least life without the possibility of parole. And now that seems like it's off the table. Explain to voters what's going on.
Let me push back on just something you said. Charge as aggressively as possible. Our job is to use our discretion and to not just charge what we can prove, because that's our duty. We can only charge crimes we can prove beyond a reasonable doubt. But our job is not to charge every crime or every allegation or every enhancement we can prove beyond a reasonable doubt. Our job is to do justice as against that defendant and for that victim or society in every case individually. So I don't charge every crime I could, because maybe I want that person to get mental health, and in exchange for them going into drug rehab or mental health or going on using drugs that can control their hallucinations, I will reward them with, say, dismissing the case or reducing the charges. So we try to tailor it specifically for that individual. Let me tell you something about the death penalty. So in 2008, I was in the death chamber as a witness to the last execution in California. And you might say, why the hell would you do that? And the answer is because, one, I was the chairman of the committee that oversaw prisons. Two, I always had the ambition of wanting to be the district attorney. The district attorney is the one that decides whether the community will seek death. And I needed to see it for myself, so that if I became a district attorney, I wanted to charge death, I thought it was appropriate, I could have that moral conviction that it met with Eighth Amendment, wasn't cruel and unusual. I needed that for myself. So I can tell you, having experienced that, I saw no evidence whatsoever that it was cruel and unusual or unconstitutional. But being that as it may, what liberals are famous for and progressives is not following the law. George Gascon is not following the law. He's not charging strikes. He's not charging enhancements. And if you remember, under 3 strikes, he doesn't have the discretion. In fact, his own deputy DAs sued him, and they got an injunction that he was ordering his prosecutors to strike strikes. And the court said, no, you can't do that.
Wait, sorry, I didn't know that. The DAs sued him? The people who report to him sued him?
His own line prosecutors filed the lawsuit because when Mr. Gascon came in office, he came up with a series of directives, which he ordered them to behave with these directives in every single case. Well, what was my point I made earlier? It's like when you paint a painting, I mean, it's never going to, even if you try to replicate 20 of the same, scene, it's never going to look the same because the palette changes, the colors change, your arm changes. Our job is to look at every case with discretion and judgment. He was ordering his prosecutors to use the same cookie cutter formula for every case. So they sued him. And a judge says, you can't do that. You cannot order your prosecutors. And on 3 strikes, the court said, hey, 3 strikes is the law. You are legally required to charge every strike that is in that defendant's history. It's in our law.
Yeah, I think people have a misimpression of who's in prison, but because my impression is we reserve that for actually people who are repeat offenders or very serious offenses. But I often hear that we have petty criminals in prison, and it's just riddled with first-time offenders and mostly drug offenses.
It just drives me crazy when I hear that argument. Okay, no,
it's a popular belief, though.
Okay, but I'm just telling you, like. It's like, can you go get your PhD without your undergraduate degree or your master's degree? Generally not, right? The only people in prison are the prisoners who have PhDs in crime, right? They did their local...
Such a good sentence.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm stealing
they did their GED and got their high school diploma and all that at the local county jail, right? Unless you commit a murder, a rape, you're a sex offender, you're not going straight off to state prison. You have to literally graduate to state prison. And with our state legislature passing these just crazy laws, but I want to go back to something you said at the very beginning because we need to put a hook on it. And that is, not only is George Gascon and Chesa Boudin pro-criminal, anti-victim, our state legislature has become that as well. Victims' rights in California... I was a campaign manager for Proposition 9, Marsy's Law, and we put the Victims' Bill of Rights into the California Constitution in 2008. So I ran that campaign. I helped write that initiative, and we were off to the races. I mean, we were front and center on protecting victims' rights. By dismantling the death chamber, I mean, think about this. You are a family, your child was murdered. And you have waited 20 years for appeals to go through the system. And now the person that killed your child has run out of legal procedures. And now the death penalty was ordered by a jury, right? Because only a jury can order death. So 12 people all agreed death was appropriate. And now everything has been exhausted. And now that person is living in San Quentin, and you are now 75, 80, 85, and you will never see the day that the person that killed your child will be executed.
Right. You'll never see justice.
Never see.
But doesn't this go back to the race argument? I mean, everything sort of always goes back to race in society right now. But that's the big divergence, is that then somebody says, well, yeah, but we kill people of color at a higher rate than we would kill a white person for the same crime.
Well, the fact of the matter is that more whites commit crimes in America than people of color. Just certain states may have more disproportionate based upon their population. And also you have to look at who's committing the crimes. I mean, if somebody think about this. The police arrest somebody, the district attorney files, they go in front of numerous judges. They put all that evidence on in front of a jury or a judge. That person's convicted. They can go through all the levels of appeal. Those cases are affirmed. And yet after all that scrutiny, everybody in that system, right, at every level, the police, the prosecutor, the judge at the Superior Court, the judge at the appellate court, the judge at the Supreme Court, they're all racist, right? We're all literally of the same lineage and the same it is ludicrous.
Yeah.
But
that's an important point. I actually want to emphasize that. That's such an important point. That to say that by the time someone was put to death, that's the racist act, you would have to say from the very beginning, there was a daisy chain of, 20 plus people who were similarly racist and conspiring to be racist against people of color. That's a really interesting way to put it. Because I don't think people will appreciate that at all.
Look,
they're just looking at the outcome.
There's a coin here. It's Gideon versus Wainwright. That was given to me by one of the former public defenders. And basically, right, everybody has a right to counsel. Everybody has a right to attorney. I keep this next to my desk. I am a prosecutor. I was a police officer. But I fundamentally believe in the theory and the practice that you must make the government prove its case. Government, look, I am very circumspect about government. Government can intrude in all of our lives. Government can eavesdrop on our conversations. They can come into our homes with a warrant. They can survey us. We have to all be part of the agenda that says the government cannot become too powerful. I am, as a prosecutor, I'm always concerned and always monitoring how much power my office has. I have to personally approve wiretaps in the county before they go to a judge. That's where we listen to people's phone conversations. So, we have to protect ourselves against government overreach. But the Democrats say that all the time, right? We have to protect people's individual rights, but they're the ones that support big government and more intrusion into our lives than anybody else. And I find that very, very frustrating.
That's precisely right. Okay, I want to talk about your race for a second, because you've got what I would call a Gascon type.
I do.
Chesa Boudin running against you as well. So, tell us about that. What's this guy stand for? Who is he anyway?
Well, he's a real person, and he was recruited by George Gascon in L.A. and Max Szabo. Max Szabo is George Gascon's campaign manager and spokesperson, and he is now my opponent's name, Peter Hardin. Peter Hardin's campaign manager and spokesperson. And so they went out. They're smart. The Republicans did this. They call it the Young Guns program. They went around the country. Kevin McCarthy, the minority leader in the House, I was his whip in the state legislature when Kevin and I served in the assembly. They go around and they try to, now they're smart. They go around and try to recruit somebody who kind of meets the demographic or the profile of that location. So Mr. Hardin is a former Marine JAG officer. He was an attorney in the Marines, and he worked in the district attorney's office. So they thought, perfect, he's the right archetype. And the fact of the matter is, there was an Orange County Register article recently that explained that he was honorably discharged from the military, but he engaged in adultery. He was married at the time and had a child with another woman. And so he was given the choice to, because of that's considered dishonorable conduct. So they picked a Marine who now had to admit, and finally the media exposed, that he was a dishonorable Marine. And he worked in the district attorney's office, and he engaged in all kinds of sexual misconduct when he was in the district attorney's office and unprofessionalism, and he ended up resigning in lieu of being terminated. So here they picked a guy based on two classic characteristics, and he has failed both of those tests because they didn't vet him and they didn't know all these things, and now they're learning these things about him because my campaign and I'm forcing him to address it. But think about this. Your district attorney is your chief ethics officer in your community, right? I judge the conduct of police officers and elected officials and, everybody, right? We bring criminal charges against people who engage in misconduct and cross over into criminality. And he wants to be the chief ethics officer, and yet he's failed in every profession he's had to even follow his own personal ethics and morals. But really, look, this is a much bigger issue, not just my campaign here in Orange County, right? This is happening across the country. And whether it's George Soros or Netflix, or Facebook, there's individuals in our country today who are pouring in millions of dollars of their personal wealth to change prosecutors' office in our country. And we've never seen
to fully reshape it.
We've never seen this attention or this much money.
Yeah, it's taking sort of a belief that all people have, which some reform is good, but then saying we're going to dismantle the entire system and replace it with one that is in our vision, the our being this very small enclave of extremely wealthy elites. And it's why your race is something that everybody needs to pay attention to, because it's coming for your county next, unless people sort of, wake up and figure out what's going on. Why does George Soros care so much about the district attorneys of some of these counties? There's a reshaping of America that's going on. So
I think I can make just a real quick point on that. And that is,
please,
I think George Soros, he was involved early because he wants to create chaos in America. He wants to completely dismantle our democratic and republic system. He wants to create a whole new system from the ground up. And he's been committed to that agenda. It's these other people that have been recruited that I think they think they're just helping society advance. but they don't understand the real agenda that they've been pulled into. I don't think, look, Netflix is that the founders of Netflix believe in capitalism. All right. No, they're not going to redistribute their wealth. Facebook, Zuckerberg believes in capitalism, but they want to kind of shed off some of the guilt I think they have for being so successful in America that, hey, let us choose how we kind of redistribute some of our wealth. What Soros wants to do is create a socialist system that the government redistributes your wealth even before you get it in the first place.
Totally. We used to joke. I'm smiling only because we used to say, because I'm in the Valley in tech, it was don't take it from the plan. Let me keep my money. So I'm going to throw a bunch of money over here to distract you so I can keep mine. Please don't take it from me. Okay. We're out of time, but here's, one of the things, the whole reason we started this podcast was there's just such a growing frustration in California, with the direction that the state is going and what's happening, and people love this state. I mean, we all want to stay here and build our families and our companies here and our lives here. And we want this to be a great place for people to come and thrive. And so, the last question for you is, what can people do? Because I think people are feeling really dejected and overwhelmed, and the system is too big and there's too much money. Who am I against Soros and Reed Hastings? How can I take these people on? So what would you say to people that they can do to contribute to keeping our state great?
Well, look, I mean, I'm selfish little pitch, ToddSpitzer.com helped me out. I mean, I've got to fight back these, efforts to try to take me out. I don't take it personally. It's just, they don't like what I stand for, which is pro-victim, law and order, safe communities. All right. I don't want homeless on our streets, and I wouldn't allow homeless to take over the streets in Orange County when I was a county supervisor. So I built a shelter, and we cleared our riverbed next to Angel Stadium, and we don't have a homeless problem like they do in San Francisco and Los Angeles. I mean, people should understand that the reason they're seeing filth in our inner cities and corrupt politicians and public policy that it's taking away our freedom, it's all related to the people we're electing. I mean, it is not difficult to follow the how this is all evolving. And so, look, people have to make a decision. Do you want to walk away from your extremely strong equity house now in California? Like we're all, become wealthy because if we own property. Do you want to walk away from that and go to Texas, Tennessee, other states that seem to be, have more, or Florida, more common sense? Or do you want to stay here and fight? And what I'm saying is stay here, damn it, and fight. And you don't have to elect crazy extreme Republicans, but don't elect crazy extreme Democrats / progressives. I'm like Dennis Prager. I don't have problems with liberals because I can understand they have a philosophy and they're fighting for it. It's these socialist progressives that are ruining society. It's not the liberals per se. It's these crazy progressive socialists that are ruining our society.
I agree. And I think it's what Steve and I say, which is you got to take your dollars local. When I see people writing these checks to the let me reverse the 2020 election fund, this is such a waste of money, and it's such a waste of time. Where your dollars actually matter are these local races. And it doesn't matter that, if you don't live in Orange County, it matters to property values. It matters to, what values we espouse in the state. And it's actually just a place where your dollar matters. Like a dollar actually matters in a DA race, where it doesn't matter at the national level. So I really do think people need to pay attention to these local races, pull it local, support local candidates like yourself. And that's really a way to say we're going to save our state by, standing behind people who espouse law and order, reject chaos, and are for accountability, and support what the voters already said, which is we want to be tough on crime. We want safe neighborhoods, especially people of color want safe neighborhoods.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
So,
right.
Yeah. So thank you, Todd. That was so great. I really enjoyed our conversation. You're fantastic. So you said ToddSpitzer.com.
That's my name,
is that where people find you?
ToddSpitzer.com, and they can donate and contribute. And look, I said it before, I spent $1.5 million. This is going to be a much more expensive race. And I know that even the smallest dollar amounts are helpful. That just means you care. I don't care if it's $5, $10, $20. Just do it. do it as soon as you can, and I'm so appreciative for that support.
Amen. Okay, great. Thank you so much, Todd.
Right.
Okay, Rebels, that's it for today. Thank you so much. That was just absolutely fascinating. I feel so inspired when we get to talk to people who are actually putting their time in trying to keep this state great. Everybody's exiting. We can't let them exit. We got to stay in for the fight. And so part of that is you helping us. You've got to follow the podcast on whatever platform you like, whether or not that's Apple, Spotify, watch us on YouTube. Hit like, subscribe, and then most important, tell a friend, because the whole purpose is for us to do this together. Let's save this great state together. Let's help you get informed, and let's all fight the good fight together. That's why we're part of California Rebel Base. So until next time, thank you.